There we go. I recently had a very strange experience of psychosis without any alcohol whatsoever. And that is a first for me. And hopefully a last as well. In a previous video I talked about having come very close to relapsing and instead taking codeine. And that codeine made me lose my mind for about 4 or 5 days. I have no real recollection. And wound up in a psych ward. And that has... and something like that just naturally will make you reflect on your own behaviour. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Brothers, sisters, comrades and friends, welcome to Bad Country. So a very, very quick recap of the last 2 weeks of my life. I was supposed to be travelling to China for a business trip. But at some point beforehand, I had taken codeine to prevent an alcohol relapse, lost my passport, and then wound up in a psych ward after taking too much codeine too quickly. I'm not familiar with it. I'm not a codeine person. I'm not a narcotic person. I'm an alcohol person. And any psych ward that you're on, or like a detox clinic or a rehab, it has a habit of making you very reflective. And the feelings that I have had since I put that episode behind me and moved forward are just overriding grief and shame and embarrassment and guilt. You see, when I turned 2 years sober about a month ago, I just felt like this was all behind me. I felt like I had it all figured out, and like my system was working. I should point out the system did work. The psychotic break that I just mentioned, I felt like I needed help, I sought help, and I got help. The end. That's not the system failing, that's the system working. But still, I was left just reeling and not knowing how to face up to what I'd done or what had happened or who knew. It seems to me in moments like that the more people who know, the worse the guilt and the shame is. If something you've done when you've been drunk is limited only to one person or only to the police or something, then you seem to be able to walk it off relatively easily. But if it's something that happened to a big group of people and strangers and you don't know who was involved, then it can be very difficult. For example, I don't know who called the ambulance for me or who called the police. I showed up to the psych ward. I was told later with a police escort and a social worker. I don't remember any of that. And my girlfriend has tried to jog my memory of some pretty horrible things I said by text, and I don't remember that either. But I know that I feel guilty about it, carrying a heavy burden of shame. And I see a lot of, 25-year-old Instagram influencer yoga teachers in Bali posting little reels like, learning to love yourself must mean to forgive yourself. And that sounds good. Sounds very tempting. And I'm sure to other 25-year-old yoga enthusiasts, they know exactly what that person is talking about. But how does that help a 40-year-old man like me? How does it help a 50-year-old woman who has lost her husband and adult kids have left the house? How does it help the normal alcoholics who can't afford to go to Bali and and do yoga retreats and meet their spirit ancestors and all of that stuff. What do? Loving yourself is just so much easier said than done. And I have a controversial opinion on this. And I don't say these things to be deliberately provocative or contrarian. This is something I believe deeply in my bones, in my marrow. I feel that there is a place for shame and for guilt, remorse. When I was toilet training my dog, I was reading all these Reddit forums and stuff, and it was all very much about gentle parenting and making sure that your puppy has a positive relationship with its poop, and you can really mess a puppy up if you scold him, if he pees or poops in the wrong place. So to make sure that I was doing things right, I hired a dog trainer, and I asked her outright, if my dog shits on the floor, what do? Do I just ignore it, or do I scold her? And the trainer put it really succinctly. She said, she has given you a behaviour that you didn't want. Scold her. And what's true of shitting dogs is true of alcoholics. We emerge from alcoholism we pupate out, like born again, fresh, when we put down the bottle at last. And we have to find our feet again. And in the process of doing it, it's almost entirely negative feelings. It'll take a long time before you feel proud of yourself. You should, incidentally. Any time spent sober, you should be proud of. But in the early stages of a long stint of sobriety, it's almost all negative emotions. The alcoholism is always trying to trick its way back into your life by telling you that you're more interesting when you're drunk, or you have more confidence when you're drunk, or you're better in bed when you're drunk, whatever it is. And it's all lies. One of the most insidious lies it tells is that you should feel guilty for being sober because you've wrought so much harm, you've done so much damage for so long. You don't deserve to be happy. You should feel bad. And the only cure to that is to drink. Just another one of alcoholism's sneaky ways back into your life. It will manipulate your feelings of guilt and shame to keep you drinking. And I think once you understand that, it gives you some power over it. Some power to resist. The truth of the matter is that if you feel bad that you were an alcoholic, that is an appropriate response. You should feel bad because for a long time you were not a very good person. That's a difficult thing to say to an audience like this, but it's an honest point, and I really stand on it. The fact that if you feel guilty for having done something when you were drunk, that is the proper response to have. It would be much weirder to feel joy having done something bad. That might be sociopathy that you have to deal with or something. It's okay to be guilty, and it's okay to feel shame. Not only is it okay, I think it's necessary. Because guilt and shame show that you've grown. You've moved beyond a certain point. You don't want to be that person anymore. Be proud of your guilt. Be proud of your shame. Another kind of facet of the way alcohol uses shame to trick you back into his gaping maw is that you should feel shame because there's something wrong with you. You have this condition, alcoholism, and there's no cure for it. And you should feel shamed because you don't fit in with everybody else. And again, once you become aware of that tactic, and it does feel like a strategy, alcoholism sometimes feels like it is consciously working against you. Once you've recognized that that is a lie, then it gives you power over it. Let's speculate for a moment about the evolutionary biology of shame and guilt and remorse. Why do they exist at all? If they were vestigial, if they weren't useful to us, we wouldn't have them anymore. After 250,000 years of modern human evolution, we would have evolved those things out. And yet, shame and guilt are such an intrinsic part of our identity, of our entire society, of every interaction we have. Shame and guilt are present in one way or another. There has to be a reason for that. I might argue, very superficially and amateurishly, that shame exists as a kind of social course correction. Right? It keeps you in line with the order and the unspoken regulations of your tribe, for lack of a better word. And as we evolved in small groups of apes in various places around Africa, our bonds with each other became very important. We became very social animals. And to do something unsocial caused a negative reaction like shame or like guilt or remorse too. And to hear some well-meaning idiot say that you have to forgive yourself, you cannot live with shame, and you must learn to love yourself. It sounds... having to control myself here, it makes me angry because it betrays such a low opinion of the complexity of humanity, that we should just forgive ourselves and leave our shame behind and love ourselves. Love your shame. It's teaching you something. I've done it. I've managed to look my shame and my guilt in the eye and face it down. And that was a major part of, not all of it, I still have a lot of work to do there. In general, I think I've made quite good progress. Not stamping the shame out, not stamping the guilt out, but allowing it to tell me what it's trying to tell me. I allow it to correct my course. I don't want to be that person anymore. That's what guilt and shame is doing for me. I want to fit in better, or I want to be more comfortable in the world, just more comfortable in my own body. And shame and guilt are great teachers of that. I would further add, since a big part of my sobriety is also negative visualization, let's just explore that for a moment. So, negative visualization is a Stoic concept in which you deliberately and consciously imagine the very worst things that can happen to you or to a loved one. And then you sit with those feelings so that when you experience them in the real world, they don't hurt so much. So let's negatively visualize. Let's say, for example, that you're in prison right now. And the reason you're in prison is because you got drunk as fuck and you drove your truck into a family sedan and killed everyone inside, and you were the only survivor. I think you would be hard-pressed to find even the most mindful of mindfulness coaches come to that person and say, you need to forgive yourself. There are some things that we do that are beyond remorse, that are beyond shame, that cannot be undone. Some social taboos cannot be crossed without consequence. So there is a line beyond which some behaviour is so shameful that it cannot be forgiven. But who is the moral arbiter of that line? Who gets to decide what is socially acceptable, socially forgivable, and what is not? What I'm talking about, though, is just a kind of like blanket general shame and guilt. Because there are very destructive forms of shame and guilt. I think what you need to do is just wet your beak in the shame and the guilt. That's a gross sentence. But not lose yourself into it. It's easier said than done, as much of sobriety advice is. Like, shame can be productive. It can lead you to change your future actions based on your previous ones for the better. Or it can be extremely toxic and lead to isolation and endless rumination about why you feel such shame. And every time you feel shame, you drink, so you feel more shame, so you drink more. So don't lose yourself in the shame. In fact, tell someone what it is. Tell someone the thing that you are ashamed of. Because if you give it a voice, it can be metabolized. And guilt, too, can serve as the kind of machinery, the engine of positive change, of improving your behavior, of knowing right from wrong. Guilt is a powerful influence on me, and it's made me very polite, because I remember times in my life where I was less polite and hurt people's feelings. It made me feel guilty, and I didn't like feeling guilty, so I stopped behaving in that way. It made me quite polite. Unnervingly polite, but capably violent, as Henry Rollins once put it. The reason why this is on my mind is because I did see one of those kind of hair-braided, young, sober people doing yoga on the beach in Bali, talking about shame and living a shame-free life. And it looked very utopian, very idealistic, and therefore, for me, very unrealistic. And I'm sure that a lot of you might think that my plumbing the depths of shame and guilt and of the negative aspects of human anxiety, that I must be nihilistic. And I am, to an extent. But I don't see existentialist philosophy as inherently nihilistic. I see in the really dense works of existentialism a real exuberance about life itself, about just the amazing capacity and capability we have to even feel bad should be a privilege. And I've taken that in. I believe that. That's why you should be proud of your shame. After all, it wasn't the shame and the guilt that ruined my life. It was the alcohol. It was the alcohol addiction. The shame and the guilt came later. It's much easier to cut out the alcohol and then deal with the grief and the remorse and the regret than it is to just keep drinking through it and never facing it. And what I think it comes down to is this: while I'm feeling particularly existential, the goal for recovery, for sobriety, is not always to feel the best that we can possibly feel. The goal is to live honestly and with authenticity. And sometimes that means looking the shame and the guilt directly in the eyes and saying, "You are me and I am you. and it is not okay to shit on the carpet. If any of this has connected with you, please do like and subscribe, or head over to the Patreon, where you can be a bit more actively involved. As always, thank you for watching, and good luck out there.